One thing that was a recommendation of our auditor, we had some recommendations from our Title I on-site review, and we also have administrative recommendations, things that we found in our policy that are not as workable or manageable as they should be. So we're recommending changes as well. Next you have sort of a table of contents. It's one page on both sides. And it starts with the 1000s and walks you through, and there are 37 items on this table. These are the policies that we're suggesting the board take a look at and consider for review and update. Next you have 2 pages that are adapted from a document that we used back in 2007 and 2008 when the board first adopted MASB policy. It's kind of a procedure for policy review and approval by the board. And then you have a whole series of tab pages, which Anna has painstakingly labeled. And I'll tell you, her system works beautifully. It really does. Because I'll tell you a little bit about our process in a minute. But every policy that's on that table of contents is tabbed here, and so you can go right to it, or you can, if there's something you're particularly interested in, or you can just start at the beginning, which would be our suggestion, and work your way through. And if you flip over to the first policy, which is actually a board bylaw, board advisory committees, you'll see the new suggested policy, and you'll see parts of it are highlighted in yellow. The parts highlighted in yellow are the changes. Those are the new things. Once in a while, you'll see something lined out also, which means it was part of the old language and it was lined out. All right. So, everybody with me so far? Any questions? All right. Now, this will become familiar to board members who were on the board the first time we started with MASB policy. So, I'm going to just walk you through the procedure. We're not going to start our review tonight, but you are going to leave tonight with a little bit of homework. But you have plenty of time, and yes, we will be checking it. We won't be giving you grades.
Right.
How are you going to report it to the state?
Our legislators may come to that, you know, you never know. I wouldn't say that too loud. Okay, so follow along with me. The MASB policy revisions for 2012 are designed to replace 37 of the district's former bylaw and policy collection, except for those policies that the board feels must be retained due to their unique meaning to the district. So for instance, you may encounter some policies that just fit perfectly with the way we do things, and the board can decide to ignore the suggestions from MASB. Many of those suggestions, know that many of those suggestions have legal citations at the bottom, meaning here's the new law that says you need to do it this way. So you're ignoring something that has a legal basis would be putting the district in harm's way. We'd be subject to litigation and may actually harm students. So we'd have to caution you against that. But it is the board's prerogative. It's your policy. All right. Therefore, the board is advised not to spend time trying to compare the new MASB manual to their old collection of policies. That line doesn't make sense by itself, but that will come to clarity in a few minutes. All right. When the project is completed, the board will be advised to pass a motion that adopts the new bylaws and policies. An orderly process for updating bylaws and policies will help to eliminate confusion on the part of the board and the district staff as to just what policies are to be followed. What happens is if we don't have a very orderly policy revision procedure, new policies get put out. Sometimes they get put in the building notebooks, in your policy notebooks, those of you that maintain them. Sometimes they don't. People stash them somewhere, whatever. Before too long, we have some people that are operating under the new policy, some people that are operating the old, and we have mass chaos. All right. So we have a system in place that's designed to prevent that from happening. If everybody follows the instructions, that shouldn't happen. In many respects, the progress on this policy project will depend on the procedure adopted by the board and the degree of involvement by board members. The procedure and timeline we present here is designed to use the district administrators as a filtering agent for the Board of Education. The administrators have been charged with the responsibility of receiving the initial first drafts of the policy changes section by section. The superintendent and the administrators have reviewed each section, making district desired edits and corrections. That edited version should be presented then to the full board for a first reading. We have found by experience that this method is the most efficient while still maintaining the involvement of the full board before a final draft for adoption. So just in summary, here's what's happened so far before you laid eyes on this. All right. We received the draft copies from MASB and also from Neola in some cases. Anna and I first went through these and we organized them. Then I went through and read them closely. And there were some things that I changed. Most of those were housekeeping edits. They might have been as simple as a grammatical error or changing in sentence structure to change a sentence so that it made more sense to more people. Some of those edits were substantive in that the recommendation wasn't exactly aligned to the way we do things here in Romulus, and if the way we do things, in our opinion, was superior, we edited those to align better, more closely with the way we do things. All right. Then my next process was to go to the people that are really in charge of that area. All right. The first two sections, the 1000s and the 2000s, are board bylaws and district administration. That's my area. I work with the board on board bylaws, and I work with everybody on district administration. So I review those, and occasionally I may consult one of the directors if it's an area that's closely related to human resources or to business. Many of the ones are related to business, so Sherry was involved in some of those decisions. If administration was related to curriculum instruction, I would have involved Paula and Sue. Next, policies 3000 and 4000 are related to business and finance, so Sherry and I work on those together. 5000 and 6000 involve employment, employees, and negotiations, so Rebecca and I would work on revisions of those. Board policies 7000 and 8000 involve instruction and students. So I would work with Paula and Sue Mitchell on those areas because those are their areas of supervision. And finally, 9000 is public relations, and I involve pretty much all the administrators on those things before they get to the board. So we've acted as a filter, like it says in the instructions, and there's certain things that we've taken care of so that you don't have to. I don't want you to think that we've made substantive decisions for the board. That's not the case. But what we've done is try to clean things up so that they make sense to you and so that they're aligned with the way we do things in the district, with our procedures and our regulations. So now it's your turn. So we come to step one, all right? 2/3 of the way down on the first page here, all right? Suggested procedures, I'm sorry, just above that. Each board member has a policy notebook that includes former policies and bylaws in the left-hand pocket and proposed revised policies in the rings. And you'll notice in your notebook you should see a couple of highlighters, and you should also see a pad of sticky notes, all right? And some of you are smiling because you remember doing this before. Okay, so
Remember, Cheryl.
I know very well. That was like when I first got on.
when we leave tonight, what you're going to do at your leisure, and you've got plenty of time to do this, your deadline is April 23rd. So you have more than a month to do this. And I want you to take your time. I don't want you to have to rush and do it when you're tired or not in the mood or whatever. But as you read through this, you're going to read things that make perfect sense to you. And in some cases, you may have direct knowledge of instances where, yeah, we do it that way. That makes sense to us. You're also going to read some things that this doesn't make sense, or why would we want to do it this way? What I want you to do when you come to something where you have a question or an issue or just uncertain or feel like the board needs to discuss it, that's where your highlighter comes in. Highlight that area or just the policy number and the specific things that are bothering you, and then put a sticky note on that page so that it sticks out, you know, kind of like, you can see my system here. You've got fatter sticky notes, but kind of like this, so that you know when you're going through this, you know all the pages that were sticky noted, and I'll tell you why it works that way in a second. All right, so that's the system I want you to use as you read through this. All right. Then, when we get together, on April 23rd, what we're going to do, rather than read every policy verbatim, which I'd be willing to guess that after 3 or 4 sections, everybody would be kind of glazed over. What we're going to do is we're going to flip through. I'll start off by saying policy 1180. Were there any questions or concerns? If nobody has any, then I'm going to assume that you're accepting the recommendations as written, and we'll go on to the next one, 1300 in this case. And we'll keep doing this, and as people have questions, we stop. We review the questions, and I think you'll find that in some of these, multiple people will have questions on some of the same things because you're used to our procedures, and there will be things that are unfamiliar to you. The idea is we discuss, we get consensus on things. In some cases, we may change what's written in here to better suit what the board wants to do. In some cases, we may say, you know what, not comfortable making those changes right now, need to check with our attorney and see if that's okay, or need to check with MASB and see what their intent was in that language. Maybe there's a logical reason why we're all confused. But at some point down the road, we're going to get through all of this, and we're going to get consensus. That's our goal, is to get consensus on these 37 policy revisions, and we have plenty of time to do this. The only one that that has a time-sensitive deadline, as I recall, was the bullying policy, and I do believe it's June 6th, which gives us plenty of time, but part of me says that they extended that a year. Does that sound familiar, or I might be thinking of something else? Not the bullying? Okay, so...
if they could get that implemented tomorrow, they want it.
Right. Well, and we can always, if we get pressed for time and it takes us beyond June 6th, we can certainly pull that one out and approve it. I would hope we could come to consensus on one policy. Even though that is one of the more comprehensive ones, you'll see the recommendations for that are pretty logically written, and I don't think you'll have too many issues with that.
Carl, got a question here, because some of these policies you got down here, written down here, the policy numbers, then they're like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the last 6. I don't have them in my book.
They're under
They're in the
last
back.
tab.
They're not in order.
Okay.
Those were human resources related issues that Rebecca became aware of, and we didn't necessarily get MASB policy on all of those. Some of those we got from different sources.
I was looking at the tabs and I was like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because it won't make sense to other people, too.
So the 5,000 ones you were talking about?
These ones right here, all the ones like here.
Okay.
I said you were making
They're in the very back, because I asked Teresa, she didn't have them either, and that's why I thought.
So once we've come to consensus on the language, then your bylaws state that there are 2 public readings. It doesn't mean, again, that we're going to read every word of every policy. It means that the new policy revisions are available to the public at 2 consecutive board meetings. Anyone that wants to come in before a board meeting, during the day, anytime that the office is open to review those policies, has a right to do that. And we'll keep a notebook here.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was going to ask. Will we have a binder available for
we'll have a binder on hand, and we'll have someone on staff who can explain and walk them through the process so that they know what you know. And anytime they have questions or anything else, and those people have a right to come to you and say, I'm really opposed to this policy. I don't want you to adopt this, or I want you to make this change. And that could happen. But again, it's up to the board. But at some point, hopefully before June 6th, then we'll be taking this recommendation for board adoption, for formal adoption. And then what happens is we send it back to MASB. They keep a kind of a working document of our board policy. So they'll fold these into the new working document, send us back a final policy. And when they do that, what they always have is they have revision dates. So it'll say policy 1180 revised June of 2012, so that if there are 2 conflicting policies, we look at the one with the most recent revision date. That kind of helps us, solve a problem on occasion.
Just to clarify, Carl, you're talking about the first and second reading, and then the board adoption at the 25th. But we know the bullying one has to.
I've got some work to do on the dates, right? Yeah, we may have to have a special meeting before that. Or, what I want to do is I want to give you plenty of time to read through these. I don't want that to be rushed. But if I find that at the end of the month everybody's finished, we may step this up a little bit.
Okay.
Because the approval could also be done at the second reading if that goes well, we could adopt it
Yes.
that night.
That's correct.